Alright, ladies and gentlemen, let me know that you can hear the broadcast loud and clear. Welcome to MCJ Report on this Thursday evening. I hope that the connection is going well. We're going strong on Rumble. I can see several of you in the chat group right now, so greetings to everybody. And I usually, when I begin my broadcast, I like to greet people by name, but there's a lot of usernames which appear particularly difficult to pronounce. So I'll give it a go anyway. Well, not all. There's Phuket Phil. Phuket Phil is back. Welcome back. There's Robin, DW Seeker. I see you there. Sharon, Peter, it's great to have you guys on the show. Thank you so much for being here with me. Feel free to share the broadcast. I believe there is a way to share Rumble. I was having a look at the mobile phone app, and I believe there is a button in the bottom right-hand corner. Let me know if you can see that button. You just click the button and you can share it out to your networks. So you should be able to give it a share to Facebook, Telegram, Twitter, or whatever social media platforms you like to frequent. And that way we can get the word out there. I like Rumble. I think that this is absolutely a move in the right direction. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you for being a part of it. Now, before I introduce our guest for tonight's show, I just want to make mention of something, and that is that I have sent an email out to my MCJ email database in relation to, how should I put this? The first step I would take if I was facing a choice between losing my job or taking the COVID jab. It's referenced. I've sent it out. The email system is a little bit slow. So if you have entered your email address at mcjreport.com/join, you will be receiving an email from me just going through the details. So we make some references that every employer should really have brought to their attention. So if you happen to miss that email, then you can go ahead and enter your email address at mcjreport.com/join, and I'll send another email tomorrow, essentially with a link to the same information. So I try to put myself in the shoes of somebody losing their work, and in my opinion, and this is just my opinion alone, I think the first step would be a letter and a discussion before embarking on further action. That's just my opinion. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, on tonight's show, we have a nearly an hour interview with our United States correspondent, Mike Closer. Mike is the former host of the Best Closer show over in the United States. At the peak of the show, it was the most popular feed via Periscope, which was the live broadcasting arm of Twitter. Mike racked up millions of views. I was a regular guest on Mike's show over the years as the Australian correspondent, and it was Mike's show that was the basis and inspiration for MCJ Report. Now, we love having Mike on. He gives commentary unlike what you would hear in the mainstream media, and that's what we're all about on MCJ Report: independent media and independent perspectives. Okay, so without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get the interview rolling along, and I'll be present in the chat group during this. The interview goes for around 50 minutes. We talk about all things United States, so get comfy and enjoy the show. All right, we are joined once again by our United States correspondent, Mike Closer. Mike, welcome to MCJ Report, and let's just get stuck straight into it. I've been reading some reports from New York City, which seems to indicate that businesses, restaurants that I read about, are down in terms of takings as much as 30 to 40% as a result of these new mandatory vaccination policies prohibiting certain people from society accessing businesses. Is there anything you could comment on the state of affairs in New York in regards to that?
Absolutely. First, I'm glad to be back. Sorry to all of our Australian brothers and sisters that are dealing with some of the most disgusting things we've seen on film in a very long time. We've dealt with some of that, but you're really going through it in a really bad way. To address your question, not only are businesses down 30+%, but the barges that deliver the goods are stuck offshore in California, in New York, and all the strategic ports that are run by Democrat governors. All of these COVID restrictions will not allow offloading of these containers, which has caused a worse backlash, Morgan. Our inflation has jumped to the highest we've ever dealt with since the Great Depression. And food prices are 40% up, in some cases 50% up. They're starting to talk about a toilet paper shortage again and all the other stuff that goes with it. So prices are up at the restaurant themselves. Restaurants are restricted still about how many and who they can serve. And they're making the vaccinated feel like the pariahs, if you will, versus the unvaccinated as well. Now they're telling vaccinated people that you're the problem after telling them that they were the heroes in getting vaccinated, just like the healthcare workers and all the stuff that went along over the last year and a half.
Interesting. And how exactly is the government putting forward that vaccinated people are the problem? That sounds kind of confusing to me, because the narrative here in Australia is that the vaccinated are the solution. So tell us a bit more about that.
So we were told, even with President Trump back in the day, that vaccinated was the solution if you choose. Now they also have drugs that have come out that you can take to take care of the symptoms without getting the vaccination. So they turned the people that were the heroes, the healthcare workers, the people that first chose to be vaccinated, into the anti-hero now. And they're shaming them for still not wearing a mask. So you're double vaccinated. In some cases, some people are getting a booster, and then they're wearing a mask. And if they don't, they're mask shamed for being vaccinated and not having a mask.
That's crazy, Mike, because we know that the narrative in so many countries around the world has been, go and get your jab, go and get your booster shot, and you can return to freedom. But, you know, even here in Australia, in my state, Victoria, one of the so-called rules are here, one of the so-called directions is that people who are fully vaccinated can gather in a group of 5 in a park, which begs the question, if the government had so much faith in the vaccine, then why couldn't 200 or 500 fully vaccinated people gather in a park? So what we are witnessing in Australia is that freedoms, in inverted commas, are actually not being restored to those that adhere to the demands of the government. Are you seeing a great deal of that as well?
We are. In fact, we were just told that we may not be ready even to gather for Christmas. We've been such bad boys and girls that we're not good enough to gather at Christmas or make our own decisions, even if you're vaccinated or not. Dr. Fauci says he just doesn't know yet. The fact that all of us are relying on one voice or two voices, barely of science, to give us this information or to guide us in a direction is horrible, when we should be relying on the parents to make the decisions for kids in school, not for the public school systems, not for the teachers, not for the bureaucrats. And yet we're giving all these people all the power. Shame on all of us for not banding together to stop this nonsense.
Yeah, Mike, I couldn't agree with you more. And everything you've mentioned, we're experiencing here in Australia, plus more. We actually have a government policy here in Victoria which completely overrides parents' rights to choose whether or not their child in school takes the COVID-19 vaccination. And the government has come up with a new phrase called mature minors, which doesn't have a specific age limit, but essentially allows teachers or perhaps healthcare workers or government workers to determine that a person under 18 is supposedly mature enough to decide whether or not they want to take part in a medical intervention. Have you also seen an assault on parents' rights since the inception of Corona?
We have. It happened more in California with the horrible governor there. What's happening today is that if teachers are not vaccinated or students, they can't come, period. In fact, many healthcare workers and teachers are being fired. Police as well. We've seen 11,000 police let go over the United States. We've seen teachers let go in mass quantity. And these are the same people, Morgan, including the healthcare workers that were called heroes for working amongst the original pandemic a year and a half back. And now they're being called pariahs in the complete opposite effect, the same people we called heroes. Kids our age back in the day, let's say back in when you were 12, chances are that your body fought off all the flus and colds and your parents treated the symptoms, and with some soup and some love and some television you weren't allowed to have during the day. And in 98% or 99% of the cases, you were just fine and needed no other treatment from a doctor. Well, this is being treated where now they want kids under 5 potentially to consider vaccination and want parents to do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And I think the shareholders of Big Pharma are laughing all the way to the bank. I mean, I can't understand for the life of me why it would be a good idea for children that are perfectly healthy, children that we know are not at risk of this virus or the Delta variant or whatever variant is going around. Yet the authorities, at least here in Australia, they never talk about the true facts in relation to what is the actual risk posed to children. Instead, we hear some commentators in the media proclaiming that coronavirus will become a pandemic of the young people. And it concerns me to see where this is all going, Mike. So do you see much difference from state to state? Or is Joe Biden trying to unilaterally impose these types of mandates across the entire country?
He's trying to, but mandates don't really mean the law. And most of the proper governors that we all support, DeSantis and many others that are conservative governors, are doing the proper battle in the courts to make sure that their state is not taken over. It reminds me of the fake climate change, where they have these so-called scientists that they pay a lot of money to that will come on and say the polar ice caps are melting. And then we'll see a full report from all the other scientists that show you that the polar ice caps are up 13%. They're the thickest they've seen since they've been studying ice caps. So it's the same misnomer of justice, where they continue to feed false information from the paid scientists, when in most cases we wouldn't have known about this unless we were told about this. Meaning, if it was never said that there was corona and people just ended up with the flu, it just would have been a horrible flu season with probably more deaths, or roughly more deaths than normal over the last decade. But in truth, they didn't. And so they made it where it had to be a sellable item. We need to sell you on this disease. Now we're going to sell you on the cure. Now we want you to have boosters, because boosters should go on forever. And they want you to get used to having boosters, where no one's participating in boosters in the United States so far.
Interesting. And what we see from Israel is that those who are participating in the booster program, just like many other people from around the world, facing some of the most draconian restrictions and government overreach of anywhere. So Here's another question for you, Mike. I've seen several scenes from the United States of different politicians posing for photographs, right? And then footage revealed showing these same people not wearing face masks, not socially distancing, but when the cameras are rolling, they put the mask on, they stand 1.5 meters apart. What is going on with this, Mike? Do they just think that everybody's stupid, or can you explain some of the theatrics to us here in Australia?
Theatrics are a big part of all politics here, unfortunately, including Republicans and Democrats. But the Democrats, I give them credit, are the best at it. They use it to sell their base that they're doing everything they can to push forward more government overreach, and which is what they want. They want to be coddled, cared for, financially cared for, as well as the illegal immigrants that we take care of versus the way we take care of actual veterans and Americans. So that theater is so important to them. And most of them don't use their masks only for the camera. Most of them really know the truth of what the science tells them, but they need to sell it to push their $3.5 trillion agendas through that you've been hearing on the news. And unfortunately, in many cases, it's worked for them. Although right now we have a bit of a stopgap on funding what the Democrats are pushing. So hopefully that continues.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you who does not have a problem with funding, and that, of course, are the pharmaceutical corporations. Now, Mike, would you mind talking a little bit about to what degree do the pharmaceutical industries and the lobbyists have influence in the United States, and to what degree is, say, Joe Biden and Anthony Fauci connected with these types of institutions?
Not only are they connected, many of them just got in trouble, not so much those names, but they got in trouble for trading stocks right before or during the initial relationships with Pfizer and all of the other pharmaceutical companies. So they knew when to dump or to buy stock before any of us regular folk would have known what to do in that situation. Also, it is my belief that not only did Dr. Anthony Fauci participate with Canada in transferring the original virus to the Wuhan lab, but we funded them with $6 million. That money tells me that a pharmaceutical company arm had to be involved to be able to be part of the virology research in Wuhan. So I'm still thinking there's more to this puzzle, and we're going to find out at the end that pharmaceutical companies were involved in the process of the original virus. And now what we're now hearing is called a cure to the potential virus. And they're reaping billions upon billions. And this booster or fake booster is only adding to the pot.
So where is this all heading? We know there's substantial reason to conceive that United States tax dollars were funneled into gain-of-function research over in Wuhan. Dr. Anthony Fauci is vehemently denying this accusation despite the emergence of evidence. Is he ever going to be truly held to account, in your opinion, Mike?
No. And it is proven that he was involved. He did have conversations with them. There is video of it. There are letters to that effect. What they did with that gain of function, they're not calling it gain of function. And that's how he's getting around it. Most politicians, as you know, in the United States, let alone the world, do not get in any serious drama or trouble in most cases, even if it's sexual conduct or any of the other things that you would name. They rarely get a slap on the hand. They very rarely would ever serve time. So for all of us to hope that he would be behind bars or be held to account, it would only be possible under a Republican leadership. And at that point, they would only chastise him, berate him, and make him look bad in the public eye, but they wouldn't get very far with getting in any typical trouble, so to speak.
Fair enough. Now, speaking about Republican presidents, Mike, would you mind talking a little bit about the activity of Donald Trump? Has he been active? Do you believe he has presidential ambitions, or do you think it could be somebody else, perhaps to the likes of Ron DeSantis?
So most recently, there was another rally that we just had. I believe it was in Georgia. Was it Georgia or Arizona? But we just had a rally. I think it was Georgia. And he's already made his decision. He's not allowed to announce the decision. I may have said on one of your shows before, due to political fundraising. Once you make a decision to file and to make the announcement, you're now culpable and responsible and all of that for every dollar looked at in scrutiny. Not like President Trump hasn't been looked at that way already, but it would get even worse. So he makes it seem as though he wants to do this. And I don't want to sit here and tell you I hope so, because it's unfair of me to continue to put this pressure on a man that did so much for me. Would I love him to be the president again? Absolutely, yes. Would I wish that upon anyone's family after seeing what he went through? No. But there's only one person I know, Morgan, to this day that could handle the scrutiny and get through it and show major growth and gain. Because right now, Morgan, we're in the worst financial position. Our stock market's lost 2,700 points. Gold is at its lowest value ever. That's hurting the whole world in gold price, especially in Australia. All these things are affected by the United States decisions. With conservative leadership like President Trump, you can rest assured that financially and fiscally, we will be more aware and more succinct in our decision-making in the way we affect the world. Issues with China, what's going on in Russia and the pipeline to Germany, all the things that you've been hearing undone have totally rattled the world financially, and you could clearly see it.
Yes, absolutely. Now, you mentioned China, Mike, and my ears pricked up. I know that under Trump there was a huge initiative to bring back manufacturing and to confront China economically, verbally, and also militarily, especially in their immediate region. Can you please talk to us a little bit about what Joe Biden's strategy has been with China and how is that impacting the United States?
Well, since Biden is more ingrained in friendliness with China, it has paused and undone most of what President Trump put forth, including tariffs, which were holding them accountable financially. Some of their wireless and phone companies that have servers around the world that are trying to get in the United States are now going to be potentially allotted to be here, and they go against all we stand for. So the relationship has completely changed. We are now submissive to the process when we were demonstrative in the process prior. We are now waiting on them to dictate the next move when we were dictating every next move.
Okay. And what about the military in the United States? I know that also during Trump's tenure, there was a big effort to reinvest in the military, to upgrade equipment, to advance training. Have we seen that trend upheld to this stage, or how do you see that going?
No, so we were very lucky to get multiple billions from President Trump put into the military. And in roughly 3 of the 4 years he was president, we rebuilt the military over 2.5 decades worth of building. We had the most building of planes and helicopters and vehicles, the most stockpile of munitions necessary for the future. It's the most we've ever done. Immediately when a Democrat takes over, it's the first thing they cut. If you go back to Bill Clinton set us back over 25 years. Obama did the same thing, cut the military, forced retirement, and gave us the smallest military since World War II. Those two presidents did that. President Trump restored it to the strongest, greatest military, added a new branch for Space Force, which was more important than people really understand what it's about. China was starting to get ahead of us in space, not exploration. We're talking about space munitions, space attacks from vehicles, from satellites, the capabilities, all those things President Trump set a very high bar for and capitalized on Ronald Reagan's original Star Wars plan that people said was never in effect, which truly has been there for us, protecting us via satellite for a very long time. So right now, Morgan, it's not going so great. We have very little investment in the military, and we're very lucky that President Trump gave us at least a 10 or 15 year head start so he could get back in, or someone else that's conservative, and continue to grow upon that.
Interesting. And how is Space Force going, Mike? Are you seeing bold plans regarding the formation of Space Force and activity in outer space?
So unfortunately, not only is the Biden administration blocking future funding right now for this new branch of military, which they do have some employees, of course, but they're not even allowing reporting of any sort. You can't even get an update on where a dollar has gone. So I couldn't sit here and tell you where the first dollar went. Under President Trump, I know it went up to establish quite a few things. We were sending up a few new satellites that had not only laser capabilities, but other new capabilities that have never been seen before in terms of catching hypersonic aircraft that you see being currently tested by Russia, China, and many other people. So I'm not hearing it, Morgan, and I have very little update, which is sad.
Yeah, most definitely very sad. Now, Mike, you've got your midterms next year. Are you seeing any promising rising figures that could possibly disrupt your Congress in a positive way?
Wow, I'd love to say yes. And there are a few mouthpieces out there similar to you and me where, we're willing to speak up because I don't really care what someone can do to me. I'm retired. I've gone through the worst already. I have nothing to worry about. You've been through hell and back 3 or 4 times since I've known you. And here you sit today continuing the process. So I could probably give you a few names and say, wow, they're very impressive, Morgan. They say the right things when the camera prompts them. It's when the cameras are off that makes me angry, because to be silent during the times we should be loud is what's holding back. There are more of us than there are of them, and everyone forgets that on the worst day. And I think that's something we should all remember.
Absolutely. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I am seeing quite a divided USA, and to I guess bring it back through the context of Corona, I see such a dramatic difference in governance from the Republican states to the Democratic states. The Democratic states seemingly welcoming in this new style of authoritarian governance with restrictions for this and restrictions for that. And a lot of Republican states are seemingly following the lead of Ron DeSantis, throwing mandates out the window, allowing college football games to proceed with what appears to be tens of thousands or maybe up to as many as 100,000 people, no masks, no social distancing. Where exactly do you see this heading? And is there some type of possibility of succession from a couple of the United States within the United States?
Great question. That came up on my show 5 years ago or so, Morgan, about secession and what it takes and how many signatures and what the process is. I can tell you a convention of states is very, very difficult to secede from the union, so to speak. The threats are out there. Paperwork's been filed before and nothing's ever been done because you can't get any lobbyists or anyone on your side because you're unwilling to put your name on that document at the end of that day. You're not willing to say, we're going to secede from the union, where it would make the most sense right now for every conservative state to band together in this conversation, but they're not willing to do so because they're more worried about their individual political aspirations in the future. They're always thinking about 4 years from now, not for you and me, but for themselves. That's the issue with politicians. I made a comment many years ago, Morgan. I said, it would be much better that the country does a lottery for politicians. The lottery would be very simple, Morgan. It would be, let's look at the top 100 accountants in the country that are not Fortune 500, the top regular Joe accountants, the top regular Joe attorneys, the top regular Joe doctors. And let's send them an invitation to serve for 2 years and be an advocate. And they're not going to get paid very much, but they've done well for themselves already. It would give them a leg up. They would represent the common folk, and they would not be beholden to lobbyists and so on. If we outlawed the lobbyist position where money influenced the politician, and the politicians were not all millionaires, we would have a shot at making real change every single day. Until that would ever happen or be possible, we're always going to be stuck in this muck or this mire to be able to take a real step forward. That's why President Trump was so unique. and there's only one of him. And for me to put that pressure to continue is so hard for me to ask. He's the only one that doesn't care what people say or do to him. There are very few, maybe one, just him. And we may need to, unfortunately, ask him to do it one more time for the betterment of the future. And Morgan, again, if he did, how long would that last us? Would that last 4 more years after he's done? Would another conservative come after? Would it last a lifetime? I don't know. But I do know it would stop the Democrat socialist agenda from taking a firm stranglehold in the United States. If we don't build the wall, stop the immigration, we're getting flooded with hundreds of thousands per month. If we do not, there'll be more Democrat voters forever than there'll ever be a conservative. And there's only one answer to that. And unfortunately, it's going to be people rising up, and it may be with weapons 20 years from now. It may be a new civil war. I don't know. But I can tell you that there's only one more shot left. I'm not young. I'm pretty sure this is one shot left, and we better do it right.
Interesting, Mike. And I suppose that was the rationale behind the Second Amendment in the first place. And thank goodness that as a nation, you have that tool at your disposal, even should it be a last resort. And I ask myself the question, how long can you really go on like this? I've looked at the news and I've seen yet again a crisis at the southern border, which I know has been there for a long time, but seems to be getting more and more worse by the day. We know how these people traveling north through the border, we know how they vote. They vote for Democrats. We see the huge push for some type of universal basic income, the implementation of this system of corona tyranny. How long can the United States go on under this system of leadership, and believe me, I say leadership in inverted commas, before something fundamentally breaks within the system?
What's interesting is that not just the illegals voting Democrat, but they're bringing in diseases. They're not just bringing in COVID, which they're not being COVID checked, but we're told that 20% of them carry COVID. They're not being vaccinated, and they're being released into the masses, which means they're infecting other people. But we found out that they were bringing diseases that the United States has not dealt with in 30, 40, 50 years. There are 3 polio-like things going on in the state of Minnesota right now. We haven't heard or spoken of these words in many decades, Morgan. So that's another effect on us. Financially, it's draining us. We don't have the money, and yet we're treating them so much better than we treat ourselves. It's a real shame on us in every way. President Trump was the first one to speak on behalf of the American citizen and to speak on behalf of the American citizens' rights, and to make sure that the term illegal meant illegal, which means you've done something wrong. You've broken the law. You crossed the border illegally. That's step 1. In many cases, crime is up with rapes and robberies in all of the bordering states in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and so on. All of these things have a dramatic effect on police forces, which are now being defunct. An example, the Austin police force cut tens of thousands of people, some of them administratively, but a lot of them are actual police people. At the same time, they stopped 911 services for basic robberies and misdemeanors. That started yesterday, Morgan. These are just the beginning stages of what the Democrats have always hoped for and wanted to destroy us from within. And if you ask me, is it working? I see the erosion happening in front of my eyes today, and it makes many people worry. I'm ready. I'm ready to be on defense if I need to be, but most people are not, Morgan.
That's really concerning, Mike. Now, I've heard stories from the United States of entire police departments being essentially defunded, and we're seeing this defund the police agenda driven, I would think, by the Black Lives Matter movement. To what extent are you seeing a rise in lawless societies due to the laying off of police officers throughout the country?
A great example was Seattle, Washington, where they set up that fake city a year ago that you saw in the news, and they wouldn't let the police in, and the police and the mayor left them alone for a while. It was called CHOP or something like that. Well, now that same police department is so overwhelmed and crime is through the roof that the mayor decided to hire back police people because they were down by over 40% in their police department. So that's just one example of it backfiring. But yes, in general, crime is up in the sexual assaults, rapes, basic armed robberies, breaking and entering of homes, the little things, because illegals are looking for food. They're looking to steal whatever they can get and move on. Those things are through the roof for the United States right now.
All right, Mike, it's sounding like a pretty grim situation for many people in the country. I've seen a lot of footage from the United States of different protests or people gathered in bars, and there seems to be a very popular chant which is ringing through a lot of the states to the effect of F Joe Biden. I'm sure that you've heard it. Can you please tell us a little bit about this trend and where do you think it's going and what do you think it's going to result in?
Well, for sure, I have a potty mouth. It is F Joe Biden, and it's been happening for the last 3 weeks at all of the football arenas so far. So we had 100,000 at college football games, 80 to 100,000 chanting it, and it's become a viral sensation. Now it's going on in hockey arenas. It's going on at the basketball games. And what's really funny, Morgan, this past weekend, it went on at a NASCAR event. And during the NASCAR event, a reporter was speaking to one of the race car drivers, and you could hear in the background very loudly with 80 or 100,000 F Joe Biden. So the reporter said something to the effect of what sounded like F Joe Biden. They said the complete opposite to the NASCAR driver, meaning I forgot what the word was that they used, but basically it said like, let's go Howard, or let's go something else, versus F Joe Biden. And you could clearly hear on the camera the F word for Joe Biden. And so the trend on Twitter and any social media platform has been in the top 3, I believe, for almost a third week, which makes so many people so happy. He has fallen apart. The wheels have come off. People know the jig is up, if you will, and they're going to ride this wave for a while, the F Joe Biden wave.
Well, I tell you what, Mike, if it does nothing more than boost people's spirits, then I say that it's a good thing. Now, could you comment a little bit in relation to Joe Biden's health or what you perceive to be potential issues there? We see footage of him, and more often than not, it seems like he's getting worse. To me, he looked horrible even before the election and seemed to forget what he was saying mid-sentence, or there's a lot of ums, ahs, and stuttering. Has he improved or has he not? Is he getting worse? Could you talk about that, please?
Yeah, unfortunately for me, I've had the displeasure of seeing him over the last 40 years in government, because I'm in my 50s. So I've seen him, and I can tell you, he was a heck of a lot sharper 4 decades ago. And I can clearly see the decline. Again, I'm not a doctor, but I can tell you, he's not just fumbling words. He's being prompted to remember what he is allowed to talk about versus what he can't. And that's one of the struggles. That's why he's not allowed to be in front of the press unless it's scripted. When he is and he goes off script, they immediately stop the broadcast. They've done it in the Oval Office. They've done it most recently yesterday in the middle of something that he was talking about, the spending bill. They had to usher him out quickly because they know, given another 10 seconds, he's going to say something off the wall. Yesterday, he was chastising people for, Kristen Sinema from Arizona, for example, was followed into a bathroom to be pressured to pass the spending bill. She doesn't want to pass it, and she's a Democrat, and that pissed Joe Biden off. So Joe was basically giving Republicans and people like her a verbal warning, like, you better jump on board and get this done because this is our agenda. Well, let me tell you, Morgan, the agenda, that's $3.5 billion, this agenda that you've been, or $3.5 trillion that you've been hearing, only 11% of that number would go to infrastructure. President Trump wanted 80% of that number to be for infrastructure and the 20% to be for other, including wireless technologies and other things. they are trying to push through every socialist wish and want list ahead of time. And Joe Biden has been stuttering and stammering through this process in a horrible way. And he's getting defenseless and angry, which usually means he's going to mess up big time. So if it were up to me, Morgan, I say let the cameras roll and let him speak. It's much better than cutting him off.
Yeah, absolutely. I say let him speak. There was something really funny that happened not all that long ago, Mike. Joe Biden forgot the name of the Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, and instead he referred to him as something like buddy or champ. Did you catch that at all?
Yes, we got a kick out of that because I can tell you if President Trump would have forgotten, he would have been, doctors the next day would have been saying he's gone crazy. You got to put him in institution because he forgot a name. I mean, if all names are difficult, like the Asian names we have in China, Xi Jinping or things like that, I understand it could be difficult to pronounce. But Scott Morrison, very easy to remember in this case. That doesn't mean he's doing a great job, but it does mean it's easier to remember.
Yeah, well, that's very true, and he's doing a terrible job as a supposed leader. But at the time when I saw the footage, Mike, and I don't support Joe Biden, but on that particular instance, I gave him a free pass because Scott Morrison's name, in my view, isn't worth remembering for anyone in the world. And yes, that extends to Joe Biden. Now, I'm going to throw a really curly question at you, Mike. Obviously, you're a big Trump supporter and you're an opponent of Joe Biden. Is there any redeeming or positive quality about Joe Biden, in your opinion?
No, because it's everything we stand against. Yeah. Years ago, I asked my parents when I was really young, because I was into politics early. And if I didn't tell you, I grew up in a small town. So all I had in the morning was the chance to read a newspaper and to watch on TV one of 3 channels that my dad watched, which was always news. So I grew up feeding myself news and intel and seeing this guy back then. And I realized that no one is meant to be in politics for more than a term, maybe 2 terms at most. After that, professionally, it gets stale. It gets stale for them and it gets stale for us. They don't have the giddy up and go to continue to fight for what's right. They end up fighting for what's right for them and not what's right for us. And I'm including all politicians, Democrat and Republican, and around the world, that it becomes something that's for self-pleasure, when there are very few that do it like President Trump did, knowing that he would lose some of his fortune, knowing that he would lose favor with people he enjoyed or loved. He still did it anyway. There aren't many of those left. Hard to look forward for me to see many more in my future of who they may be. And it makes it very difficult. So no redeeming qualities that I can find whatsoever. And things that he has passed or been involved with have had the most negative and dramatic effects, either fiscally, spiritually, financially, you name it. I can name every category. He's affected it pretty negatively.
Yeah, he looks like an absolutely terrible leader to me. And I think the very idea of these career politicians is ridiculous. And we have the same here in Australia, people that have never spent a day in the private sector. They have no idea how the real world works. They're basically out of university, many of them with an unrelated degree, like an arts degree, working in a political office, and then somehow they're elected to parliament and they stay there for decades. And maybe in the United States it's maybe it's worse, or maybe it's just as bad. But it makes you really ask a lot of questions, Mike, when you see people like Maxine Waters that doesn't even live in the neighborhood or district that she's supposed to represent, living in a house that's worth multiples of millions of dollars, and you look at how much money these people make and think to yourself, were they able to acquire this wealth? So do you have any thoughts on this, and have you observed a lot of this type of activity from people in your government?
I have. Nancy Pelosi, I've also followed her for 4 decades. She's been involved. She is worth $300 and some million, and she makes about $192,000 a year. So you tell me how that's possible. You must be the most genius investor of a lifetime to turn $200,000 into $300 million. I want to know that exact formula. of how that's possible. You see, Morgan, none of these politicians have ever had to worry about a paycheck or concern themselves with how much taxes are taken out of a paycheck or worry about healthcare because they have what's called the golden ticket. They have healthcare that pays for everything without deductible. They have dentistry that pays for everything without deductible. They have all the things that anyone would love and be honored to earn and get that none of us will ever have. So they've never had the fear of loss. Like every normal American or Australian, they've never had the fear or worry of paying next month's bill. And until anyone has that moment, they would never be a regular person to make decisions on our behalf. They've never had that moment, and they'll continue to let lobbyists and others influence their stock trades and all the other things that they do with trading on behalf of the American people. It's very, very rough.
Interesting. So let me ask you this, Mike. In your opinion, who would you say is most likely the most corrupt person today that is active in US politics?
It's still based on everything we've learned about Hunter and other things. It's probably the Biden family, but who has the most pull with everyone would be the Pelosi's of the world as well. They have influenced negatively so many people in the worst way possible that we're probably at our lowest level of liking ourselves. And that's a shame because I have never been more prouder to have my show and support President Trump during this time of the great American comeback. And it's a shame that it got stopped short the way it did. And so having pride in your country means so much. You know that exactly what I'm talking about. And to share that pride with others and to hear it from them is important. But to get millions to say it and show it at the same time, especially under today's circumstances, so difficult, Morgan, so difficult.
Interesting. And moving up north, Mike, I've made a little joke before that you've got a migration crisis at your southern border, but there's also a huge amount of Canadians that are becoming more and more disenfranchised with the leadership of Justin Trudeau. A lot of Canadians in positions whereby their freedoms have been trampled on and expressing interest to move to the United States, preferably the Republican states, of course. Can you talk a little bit about that? And are you seeing more people from Canada seeking to move to the United States, or are they suffering in silence up there?
So far what we've seen, there's not a mass migration, but they are suffering big time. Now, under President Trump, when we signed the USMCA, that gave us preferred trade treatment with Mexico and Canada. And it also gave us a leg up on Canada, where before we had a leg down. Because of that, financially, it did wonders for us. President Trump was very strong on the northern border at the beginning of COVID, and he shut it down, which pissed off Trudeau of how could we do such a thing when we also did it on the southern border as well. So our relationship with them was never solid. Now, the most dangerous leader in world history, Obama, was very close with the Canadians and Trudeau and Macron's and Merkel's and all the ones that have had negative results of their society. Every one of those countries under those leaderships experienced the highest crime, the worst trade, the worst financial positions of a lifetime. So that's where they're at. That's why many people want to leave Canada today, and they realize that the current regime they're under has negatively affected them in every single form. But they haven't banded together yet that I've seen to make mass migration to the United States.
Yeah, fair enough. One interesting migration that I've observed, Mike, appears to be certain people from California seeking to move to Texas. I believe one of the notable names was Joe Rogan, and many have claimed they're doing so for tax purposes and to escape what they consider has descended into a horrible standard of living. We see some of the images from cities in California, these tent cities, which appear to just go on and on and on for miles and miles, and there seems to be no end in sight. Could you talk a little bit about the deteriorating state in California and why some of these people are choosing to actually leave the state?
Well, first, they love their tent cities because it brings them more government funding from Joe Biden to continue to take care of the disenfranchised illegals. They're getting help before the American homeless. They're getting first right of refusal to go to the shelters and the beds. They're getting paid. They're getting jobs. They're getting health care. They're getting all the things everyone else doesn't get. Now, the mass migration of some of the folks you just mentioned, the wealthier folks, the Joe Rogans, absolutely makes fiscal sense, and they're more conservative leaning folks anyway. But there's also been a mass migration of liberals, which has negatively affected Texas and other places as well, meaning that they're all moving to places like Austin, Texas, which tend to vote Democrat all the time. And the blue bubbles are starting to pop up amongst a few red states showing the mass migration. So does that concern me for the future of places like Texas? Sure. Do I still believe in Texas being a red state? Absolutely, yes. But they're not just leaving for the homeless encampments and things like that. The tax difference is huge. In general, being under the regime of that governor has made it difficult for everyone to have a basic day in their life. And that's why they want to be gone. Draconian measures call for you to get up and leave. You should have gotten up and left a long time ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And the concerning aspect of this is that many of these voters, these Democrat voters, they will take their voting habits with them. So the policies of which they're trying to escape from, they'll be seeking to vote for those same policies in their new home, which will ultimately lead to what? Recreating the mess that they were trying to escape. And what comes after that, Mike? Where do they move to next? Maybe they move to Florida or somewhere like there. So I don't see the logic behind it personally. And is it possible this could be a chain reaction that just eats up one state after another?
Yes. It's a long-term process because people said we were going to lose Texas 8 years ago. So I still think it's a 2-decade process for a state to start to turn in the other direction. There are some states that are considered purple that could go blue, or purple that could go red, and so on and so forth. Yes, it's not a tomorrow thing, but I can tell you this liberalism is more of a disease than people quite understand. Along with that, they bring horrible teachers that teach horrible things to young students, from gender BS to all this other stuff. And if you're teaching to someone at 5 years old, these 5-year-olds are going to be 20 and 25 one day. And when they are, they may run for politics and be the new AOC or whatever they become. And they'll be running as a fake gender. They'll be running on all things that we never would have thought would be possible. Things are going to change dramatically negatively in the next 2 to 3 decades, where the script will be flipped amongst voting for parties, voting for people, voting for humans versus alien form, the way liberals are being described today. To me, these liberals are turning into aliens. We don't need anything more from up above. I think we already have them all down here on the ground.
Interesting. I think it's fair to say that there's a tremendous amount of internal damage present in the United States. Now, Mike, if you were to give a plan, or let me rephrase that, what in your mind needs to happen, whether over the next decade or 2 decades or what have you, for the United States to return to its golden era, plus more, and plus everything being better, if you wouldn't mind telling us
Sure.
what that looks like?
First, shut down all the borders for 2 years. Shut down, no immigration, no visas, no nothing. Completely get our house in order. I think we can do that in 2 years. We need to rebuild our power grids and add 2 to 3 power grids that are impenetrable. We need to lock down our internet and make sure that it's been done in a way, in a quantum form, where it is not today. These are little things we have to do. We need to make sure our military is 100% where President Trump wanted it to be, both Space Force and non, 100%. Those are things we have to do. We need to look at our financial institutions and look at going back to the gold standard versus relying on the paper dollar. There are so many things that we could accomplish in a short term. And during that time, we really need to look at our infrastructure when it comes to travel. How is it, best supported? Is it underground? Is it in tunnels? Is it Elon Musk's new one? Is it Richard Branson's new one? Who knows? But we need to look at all those things before we start releasing all of the flyable drones and all the other things. We need to take a step back with the best and brightest in laboratories, the best and brightest in science, the best and brightest in technology, and get them all in a room and give us their best 2 years ever to strengthen the United States backbone. If we can do those things right, Morgan, we will be unstoppable for another 100 years. But we've never taken that time like we should have after 9/11 to shut down our borders and to do what's right for us. We played too many pieces of politics outside of the US when we should have been looking within the United States. Always take care of your backyard first before you start talking about your neighbors.
I appreciate that insight, Mike. Now, before we wrap it up for our discussion tonight, do you have any messages that you would like to send to my Australian audience?
I can tell you that from all the folks I still talk to, even though I don't have my show, I keep in contact with many. They're very scared for you guys. Now, many of you would say the same thing to me if I flash back 5 years when we didn't have President Trump yet, and people were scared for us of what might happen if we had a Hillary. Well, in your case, we're very concerned for the well-being of Australian citizens, which I used to call, and our president would always call, a great ally, our great friends, our brothers down under. Well, all these things are not being said anymore. And it's almost like you're being left alone to look horrible on the news for the world to see. And the news still portrays it in a way that makes your government look okay and the people not look oppressed, when everything you report, you share, and the better social media people like yourself show the turmoil in which is engulfed the regular citizen of Australia. And so I don't want to say I feel sorry for you, because I don't feel sorry for you, and I don't feel sorry for the others that are fighting. I feel sorry if you don't fight. So my message out there is, there are only a few Morgans out there and folks like him. Band together to make sure that there are more, make sure the voice is amplified. Understand that all of us have had cuts and bruises. I've dealt with trouble. I dealt with the FBI. I dealt with losing all my internet services, all my computers, everything Morgan's gone through. I've been through it all. Morgan knows that too. All these things are for a reason. And I came back. Folks like Morgan came back once again to continue the fight after what everybody has gone through. Continue the fight, amplify your voices, and remember, again, there are more of us than there are of them. And at some point, we will be unstoppable.
Mike, thank you very much for your words on behalf of our MCJ audience. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And I hope to have you back on the show next month.
I look forward to it. Thank you for having me on always. And we're here to support you all going forward all the time. So you're still our brothers down under always.
Thanks, brother. Speak to you soon.
Always.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up our discussion for this evening with Mike Closer, our US correspondent from Washington, D.C., United States. Mike, on behalf of our MCJ audience, thank you for jumping on the show and coming on the show once a month. We really appreciate your insight, and what can I say? We're looking forward to when you return next month. All right, now, ladies and gentlemen, that just about wraps it up for the show this evening. As you are most likely aware, MCJ Report runs Monday to Thursday night, 8 p.m. That's Sydney, Melbourne time. So I'd like to really thank everybody tuned in right now across Rumble and YouTube. Really, really enjoying this new format. I've also enjoyed engaging in dialogue with many of you in the chat group. So thank you for that as well. All right, so I can see quite a few of you still tuned in. There's Daz, Awake, whatever's, Denise, Purple, Spud, Banjo Boy, funny usernames. All right, now I'm going to wrap the broadcast up. So, just what we spoke about before the broadcast, I have sent information out to my email database in relation to discussions that one could have with their employer, people who are concerned about this demand from Daniel Andrews. And of course, I'm referring to what's going on here in Victoria. I sent an email detailing what I would do if I was faced with such a demand. So if you would like access to this information that I've compiled, feel free to just put your email address in. It's mcjreport.com/join, and I'll send it out again tomorrow. So that's about it for this evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to get going. Show will be back on Monday, and there'll be a lot to talk about. We've got there's a really huge announcement coming, and I wish I could talk about it now, but I can't. But I think that a lot of you are going to be really, really happy when we get to the announcement. So, anyway, take care, be safe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next broadcast.